The gods vanished and left our world in chaos, creating, altering, destroying. The Anthem is all that remains.
So we got to learn a lot more about Anthem at E3 this year. It kind of played center stage at EA's conference, and it was really where Bioware sort of came up on stage and kind of showed the world what Anthem is, what we can kind of expect from it, and it was really their opportunity to reassure fans about their latest IP. Now, did Bioware do enough to actually reassure its fans? That is what this video is going to talk about in a bit more detail. So it's taken me a few weeks really to get my head around the game, to get my thoughts together, and obviously to do a lot more research. I've read Game Informer's article, which has a lot of information on the game, watched a lot of interviews, looked at the footage. So this video really is going to talk about, you know, what I saw at E3 and what I liked about Anthem, what looked really interesting, and what my general thoughts are on the game, and whether I think Bioware have actually done enough to reassure fans. So what did I like that we saw at E3? Well, I've got to say that what we saw and what they talked about at E3 has particularly got me interested in the world and in the lore, and it sounds really interesting. You know, this setting for Anthem, it's not set on Earth, that's been made very clear. We do play as a human character. There are humans on this world, but we are not Earthlings, we're not colonists. Basically, the world that we live in or occupy is vast and extremely volatile, and it's a world that has been shaped by these ancient gods known as shapers, and they use these huge kind of relics or technology to command a force called the Anthem of Creation. Now, Bioware have sort of said a little bit about them, and they've sort of said really that ancient gods effectively disappeared, that there's a lot of mystery surrounding them, there's a lot of lore, there's a lot of legends, and the truth of what happened has basically been lost. These gods left this world, they don't particularly know why this happened, and there's a lot of different opinions on it, but what they did leave behind them was their ancient relics, which are still active and do actually activate upon occasion, and they cause huge catastrophic world events. So huge shaper storms, I think they're called, massive sort of monsters. They affect the ecosystem, and they make the world a very volatile and very dangerous place to live. Part of the appeal of this is this whole mystery surrounding this ancient race or these gods, what these machines are. You know, is this a world unfinished? So I'm kind of looking forward to being able to learn a lot more about it. We have been told that the main campaign itself does revolve around an emerging threat from the Northern Kingdom, particularly a malevolent and aggressive group of humans known as the Dominion, which are very sort of militaristic, almost kind of fascist in their approach, and they want to use the Anthem of Creation themselves for their own sort of heinous pursuit. So to militarize this piece of technology to obviously gain power and subjugate other parts of humanity on this planet. We do also know of the Scars, which are another force. Now, these are non-indigenous, so they're not from this world. They are invaders. They are an alien group, but they are also after the technology as well. So we do know that there's going to be very sort of set factions. There will be a main antagonist. I think it's probably going to be someone within the Dominion, most likely. But for us ourselves, we play as a freelancer, which is a rookie, a trained individual who basically, these freelancers wield powerful exosuits, armored suits, which grant them obviously a lot of power and protection, strength, flight, that kind of thing. You play as a rookie, so you're kind of up and coming, you're kind of young, and you know, your job effectively is to make the world world a little bit safer. So you go out there and take out particular monsters. You'll free people out in the wilds, rescue people. And I think as part of the story, you stumble across, you know, this great adventure, this mystery, which you have to uncover. So it sounds really interesting. Now, the freelancers are quite an old order. They were heavily respected, but unfortunately, let's just say life and history has not been very good to them, and they're kind of struggling at the beginning of the game. So they're kind of like the Grey Wardens, I would sort of say, in Dragon Age, the Origins. So, you know, the premise of the game, the being a freelancer, the world sounds really interesting. I love the idea of that. The gameplay looked also very, very good. You know, this seems like the Iron Man game that fans have wanted for quite a long time. We got to see, you know, all 4 javelins, which they talked about a little bit. So there are 4 classes you can play as: the Ranger, Colossus, Interceptor, and Storm. Interceptor and Storm are the more lightweight versions of the armor. Ranger is a more well-rounded, all-round kind of solid build, and Colossus obviously is your tank. It's your heavy class. Storm looked very much like the Destiny's Warlock, and Interceptor, we don't know much about it, but I suspect this will be some kind of stealth unit. It's going to have some kind of cloaking ability, maybe focus on speed, stealth, melee attacks, that kind of thing. We haven't seen much about it, so it'll be interesting to see more. But what I did see of the suits, they looked really interesting. I also like the fact that you can freely switch between these different javelins as you play the game, so you're not locked into one class like you were with, you know, Dragon Age, or particularly with Mass Effect, or even with Destiny, where you choose a class at the beginning and you're locked in with that. No, you can freely switch between these depending on the missions that you're doing. So I like that as well. I like the freedom that gives you in terms of your tactics, especially if you're playing online and you are taking on challenges. It is important to have that freedom to switch between, you know, right, I'll play as a tank, you know, I'll play as Colossus, and I'll play as a Ranger, and you play as Storm. I think it's good, particularly for that multiplayer element to the game. The actual combat and gameplay looked good. The flight looked really good. It looked fantastic. It does seem that there is like a bar, so your javelin can overheat as you are flying. There is a limit, and I think this can actually be upgraded and modified as you sort of level up your character. But the guns look fun. You know, each of the javelins has their own set guns. We got to see some of the gunplay, which looked weighty. We got to see some combos as well, which looked good. I wasn't a big fan of all the numbers that pop up on the screens and all the combo prompts that pop up on the screen. It's too much information. It's too cluttered on that screen for me. So I hope we can remove this feature in the HUD, and I hope we can change it in the settings. But, you know, it looked good, particularly the flight and the level of verticality that this brings to the gameplay. The size and scale of the maps as well will, you know, heavily be influenced by that as well. Ability to go underwater, the ability to hover. It just looked great. The suits look fun. They look like the Iron Man game that we've been waiting for. So yeah, the gameplay looked good, I will say that. Of course, I can't say 100% unless I got my hands on the game and got to actually physically play it. I couldn't say how that feels, that flight, or how those controls feel, if they feel intuitive, if they feel clunky, if it's smooth. Obviously you can't tell that just from watching a video, but what we did see, it did look good, and yeah, I like the idea of it. So, you know, those were the elements of it that I liked. Now, do I think it's enough to reassure fans? I think it's a step in the right direction for Bioware. Absolutely, I think it is a step in the right direction, but I am still heavily concerned, and I don't think that Bioware have done enough to fully reassure fans, particularly when it comes to the story, the characters in the world, and how that's going to play in. Bioware have sort of said that their whole like premise of the game is our world, my story. So you'll have our world, which is the communal sort of outside world where you'll sort of team up with other human real players and obviously take on missions together. And then you have My Story, which is going to be predominantly in Fort Tarsus, and that's where you're actually going to sort of see the consequences to your choices, interact with NPCs and get that kind of flavor to the decisions that you've made and consequences in the world, and they'll react to the story and what's been going on outside. The reason I'm a little bit concerned is some of the interviews that I've seen and you know watched with Casey Hudson and with Mark Dara in particular have me heavily concerned in terms of what their overall priority is with this game, or what their overall sort of view of this game is, and how how much importance they're placing onto the single player campaign. For me, for a Bioware, the biggest appeal of any Bioware game, and the biggest thing that we expect from a Bioware game, is a really excellent single player experience. That is what Bioware is known for. That is what we come to expect. A fantastic experience with choices, with very real consequences, with branching paths where you feel like you're making those decisions yourself. It's also, you know, we expect great companions, great fully fleshed out characters that we interact with, develop relationships with, all these kinds of things. And, you know, they are saying that you can get these in Fort Tarsus, but I don't see how this can be as well fleshed out or as well developed as we're used to. And my concern is that this single player element in Fort Tarsus will come across as very superficial, and that we won't get that same kind of impact. Now, in some interviews, you know, that we've seen with Casey Hudson, he did say in one interview with Game Informer that
in the past we've almost had single player by accident. For a good part of the development of the original Mass Effect, we were trying to figure out how it can be multiplayer and how you can have a friend as part of your story. And ultimately we didn't, not because we didn't want to, but because we just couldn't figure out how to do it.
Now, if you're a huge fan of the Mass Effect trilogy, that's a massive insult to that game, and it's very disappointing to hear that, because for me, Mass Effect has one of the best stories of last generation, the best characters. I cannot imagine that sort of spark that Mass Effect had was an accident. I just cannot see how they never intended to create it in that way. I just think it's really shocking for them to kind of say that. I think they also said Casey Hudson was talking about, you know, what fans of the Mass Effect trilogy, you know, the moments that really stuck out for them and the moments that they enjoyed the most. And I think he was talking about, you know, the moments that fans really took with them, with those moments when their friends were sat on the sofa next to them and they were playing the game together. I don't think so. Mass Effect is not a cooperative game. Of course you can have someone sit and watch the game and react to what's going on and enjoy that moment, and I've had that myself, definitely, with friends sitting there and watching as I play the game and talking about what's going on screen. But for me, Mass Effect was such a purely sort of special, private, individual experience, and that's what I took away with it. Those individual experiences in my story, those choices that I made, the shepherd that I forged and I created, you know, the people that she let live, the people that she killed, the people that she developed relationships with, the hard choices that she made, the loss that she went through, the love that she experienced. All these things are what are memorable, not sitting on the couch with my friend playing the game. So for me, when I hear things like that from Casey Hudson, it just feels like Bioware are really out of touch with their fan base and don't really understand what made Mass Effect so special, and why fans are so passionate about those games, and why fans are so concerned about the story. And especially when we hear things like, You know, there aren't going to be any kind of AI companions. That's not going to be an option. We are going to have a crew. That has been confirmed. There will be a crew on our Strider. We're going to have 3 characters that they have mentioned. So we've got Halleck, who's the mechanic, who basically keeps the Strider operational. Also, this character apparently has a long history with our player character. There is Owen, who we heard a little bit in the gameplay footage, and he's the Cypher, he's known as, and he basically provides information and support to the freelancers in the field, though he wants his own javelin as well. His voice sounds very much like sort of Vision.
It's a shaker relic. Wait, something's odd. Get a closer look, would you?
So, you know, maybe he's some kind of AI kind of interface. And we also have Faye, who we don't know much. We've only maybe seen a very slight glance of her, but she's got sort of a personal connection to one of the main threads from the Critical Path, the main story. Those are the 3 characters that we've only heard about, and those have been confirmed. Now, in Bioware games, we're used to quite an extensive cast of characters, and, you know, people in your squad that you interact with. So 3 seems like a very small number for you to interact with. Or also, there are going to be no romances in Anthem as well. Now, you don't have to have romances for it to be a good game at all. I felt a little bit in Mass Effect Andromeda that they kind of rammed romances down your throat, and they seem really forced and really sort of in your face and really awkward and really cringeworthy. You know, literally some of the characters, I just met them and already I had the option to flirt. It just seemed very unnatural and very forced and very fan servicey. You know, it was just Bioware going, here's romances, this is what you want, there are romances, there you go. So, you know, not having romances isn't a terrible thing. What I will say is some of the most memorable moments for me in Dragon Age and in Mass Effect were the romance options, and we're seeing those characters. You know, when you have romance in there and you have, you know, real characters that your character loves, it gives a sense of urgency to what you're doing, and obviously you don't want that character to die, and you're invested in the story and you care about those characters, and that's always a good thing in my opinion. So, you know, not having romances is definitely a concern as well. This whole talk about live service, and the game is going to be about a live service. This also concerns me as well, because obviously we heard a lot of that, you know, from Destiny right early on, and they are saying, you know, they are going to be offering sort of single player additions and content to develop the story and allow you to explore more of the lore. But my concern is if you're adding in that story content later in the form of DLC, kind of like what they've done with Destiny to expand on the lore, that means that the core game that you've got, those choices and consequences are not going to be as significant as they had been in the original sort of Mass Effect and Dragon Age series, because obviously, you know, you have to create this world that's very vanilla so you can fit these new story quests into it, because obviously if your world has changed and you know, your Fort Tarsis has changed and merged and things, and you can't have it change too significantly, because that story needs to be able to fit, obviously, in what you're doing. So I'm a little concerned with that. And then finally, you know, every time I see Mark Dara, you know, in interviews and sort of talking about the game, I don't know what it is, but he just makes me more nervous in terms of what he's saying, and he kind of comes across a little like a little nervous and a little defensive, and I don't know if that's just because there's a lot of pressure on Bioware, because there certainly is, but there was a question that was asked by Game Informer, and this is the question that they asked.
So ultimately, what will keep people playing this game?
This is a game that's really much more about, it's about progression and that long loot chase. So it's about acquiring your 4 javelins and then building those up and really perfecting those javelins to your playstyle, so that in the Elder game you can go on Stronghold, which are like raids, and other Elder game content to really experience the pinnacle of mastery around your javelin and around gameplay. So it's really about that.
So, you know, after hearing that, you know, that just sends off warning bells in my mind that you know, this very much is EA's answer to Destiny, and that they're wanting to bring people, keep people in the game, keep them playing, and obviously they're going to be, you know, using loot and using end game content and raids and all those kinds of things to try to keep people playing for a long time. The thing that ultimately kept people playing the Bioware games originally is the story, and how amazing the story was and the characters, and you wanted to keep experiencing that and making different choices and romancing different characters. Yeah, I mean, that's what sort of brought people back. So it just feels, it doesn't feel like, it still doesn't feel like a Bioware game, and that's what has me concerned. The world sounds interesting, the lore sounds interesting, the javelins look great, and the gameplay looks fun, but that story and that focus on loot and endgame and cooperative multiplayer play. So yeah, you know, those questions, those responses, you know, that focus on multiplayer and online play and loot and progression, those things have me concerned, and that doesn't sound like the Bioware that we're used to seeing and used to hearing from. Of course, I want Bioware to be successful. I am keeping my fingers crossed for Anthem, because I know, and I'm sure Bioware knows, that if Anthem doesn't do well, they're very much in danger. You know, EA is a publisher that is well known for closing down its studios if their games do not perform to what their standards are. You know, look at sort of you know, look at what happened to Bioware Montreal with Mass Effect Andromeda. Look at Visceral Games, you know. So Bioware's future is very much on the line with Anthem. So yes, I want Anthem to do well, but you know, I am still concerned, and obviously I guess more will have to be seen in the future. I want Bioware to actually show how the story is going to work. I'd like them to show off a little bit more of Fort Tarsus and how that plays in. Show some more of the characters, introduce some more of the characters, introduce the world, give us more information about the story, the characters, the lore. Something to hook us in, to make us interested. Don't focus on the gameplay. We know the gameplay will be good. We know it looks good, but it doesn't set Anthem apart. So they need to focus more on the story if they're wanting to convince Bioware fans to pick up this game and play it. As it currently stands, this isn't enough to make me want to buy this game. I'm still, you know, looking at it with caution and suspicion. There won't be loot boxes, that's been confirmed, but there will be microtransactions. This is an EA game, but it's also a Bioware game, so that does sort of pull me in two directions. Hopefully we'll find out more in the months to come. Let me know what you guys think of Anthem. Do you think Bioware have done enough to reassure its fans? What did you think about what we learned at E3 this year? Let me know in the comment section below what your thoughts are. If you've been reassured, tell me why. If you're still concerned, tell me why. Let me know in the comment section below. Anyway, hope you guys have a great week. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it and share the video. Alright guys and girls, well anyway, I hope you guys have a great week. Take care, and as always, happy gaming. Bye guys.